maybe give us a few lines about, what is this game? What are you doing in this game? What is the object of the game? And then if you can talk about the different sort of times that it plays in as well.
Of course. So Cris Tales, it's a very classical story, if you will. At least that's the premise. You're this little girl that discovers that she has these incredible time powers, and she is able to see past, present, and future at the same time. And we show you that as a player. When you're playing, you can actually see in real time when you move the character through the screen that everything changes in real time. You can see every character has a past, a present, and a future, or sometimes a past and a present, and maybe you don't see him in the future because he's not there anymore, or maybe something happened to him, or maybe he got sick, or he hasn't been born, so he doesn't have a past, and you just see the present and the future. So not every character has like the three elements, but with each character, we try to tell a little story. So Cris Tales is a game about seeing three time periods at the same time. It's a turn-based RPG, so you can explore different towns. You can talk to NPCs. You can get quests. You can get side quests. You can help people around the town. And you can also go to dungeons. So in the dungeons, you can fight different types of enemies, and the enemies have the same elements as the NPCs. So they have a past, a present, and a future. So each enemy that we do, we have to do it 3 times.
Wow.
And they are different from each other.
Was it, I imagine like you trying to conceptualize all this. Was it very difficult to try to think of like, a character, but in 3 different times, and how one might affect another's future? I mean, anything to do with any kind of time travel is always very complicated. How was that for you?
Well, it can be extremely convoluted, and it can get extremely confusing. So one thing that we try to do is like taking the main concept of like the theme of the game, the philosophy of the game. To me, it's always really important to have a central base to the story, to the mechanics, to everything else. So the main philosophy of the game is learn from the past, act in the present, create your future. With that in mind, we try to respect that philosophy and use it everywhere in the game. So whenever we think of an enemy, we always have to think, okay, learn from the past, act in the present, create your future. So with an enemy, for instance, we know that we need to learn from that enemy. Okay, so what are his weaknesses? How do I fight him? And if I want to defeat said enemy, I have to know how to approach him. Actually, the Colosseum that we released in the demo, it's a nice way to put that, because everyone thinks that you can just sometimes in JRPGs you can just attack and just get rid of every enemy just attacking. Well, you certainly cannot here. You will most definitely die if you just try to force brute your way through the whole Colosseum. You have to learn from it, and the same thing: learn from the enemies, learn from their weaknesses, learn how to fight them, how to do like a long run of enemies. And the same thing happens in the concept of the story. The story itself, you have to look at the past to learn, and try to act now to change the things that in the future can create a different future. It can be better, it can be worse, but you're certainly creating a different future depending on your actions or your inactions.
It has such a feeling of like this dreamlike world, right? Like you use the term endemic fantasy to describe Cris Tales, which is also a play on words. Cris Tales is also a play on words about an actual location in Colombia, which you sort of made magical in the game as well, right? Can you explain a little bit about that?
Of course. So we're trying to create this concept called endemic fantasy, which is, I mean, it's not like we're the first ones to come up with ideas like this, but we certainly want to give a name to it, because we believe it's important to grab elements from our reality and turning them into a sort of fantasy, to make them part of the fantasy world that we're creating. So, sort of like the opposite again of what magical realism tries to do,
Mm.
which is trying to take very magical elements and making them seem like part of everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
So, Virgin starts rising up and going to this through heaven in front of everyone else, and while someone else is being carried by ants, which is absolutely impossible and magical, but it's part there. It's trying to be shown as part of everyday life. So what we're trying to do is taking the elements from our culture, elements from our everyday life, and turning them into part of the fantasy world that we're creating in Cris Tales. So the easiest thing to see is, for instance, the architecture. The architecture that we see in Cris Tales, it's heavily inspired by real places in Colombia. So one of the most important and most iconic views that you can have on Cris Tales, it's a church. It's a church that is very representative of the powers that Criswell receives. The church is actually based on the Lajas Cathedral in Nariño, in Pasto, Nariño, in Colombia. So you wouldn't believe the incredibly magical places that exist here in Colombia, and that we're really trying to show people that they exist, that they are real. But we are showing them as part of this fantasy world. So at the beginning, everyone will be like, "Oh no, this is an incredibly magical place." And when they actually discover that it's all real, that it's actually a place that you can visit, we really hope that people start thinking of Colombia and associating it with a lot more positive elements and a lot more incredible things, that they would like to visit Colombia. Just as you said not long ago, which when you want to visit Colombia, you're absolutely invited.
Maybe you can give people just a bit of an overview of some of the like cultural elements that you've managed to build into the mechanics of the game.
Okay, of course, yes. So one of the few elements that we are able to see in the demo, I'm gonna focus on those. So one of them it's really small, um, but one of the characters uses plants as a magic tool, right? So these plants are called yucandragoras, which are a play on words of yucas, which is a sort of food that we have here. It's very similar to potatoes. You were talking about potatoes earlier.
Yeah.
We have yucas here in Colombia, and this little and it's a mix between that and a mandragora. You know, these little plants that are kind of like anthropomorphic, so they have hands and like little
Okay.
legs.
Yeah.
Yes,
Like a
so you can
mandrake.
actually
Yeah.
use yucandragoras here in the game and use the powers of time to make them grow faster.
Oh wow.
So that is important to us, like, you know, the concept of growing plants, because nature is really important, here in our country. So we incorporated that idea into the game, as the mechanics that one of the characters of the playable character uses to attack. Another really interesting concept that it's already out in a few videos is that some of the coastal cities in Colombia have some sewer problems. So when it rains, it powers and it also floods parts of the city. So we really wanted to show that within the concept of the game. So you will see some flooding in the let's say the not privileged district of one of the cities, which is Saint Clarity, that is absolutely divided by a really huge wall that divides like the people who are poor and the people like the elite of the city. So that, I know that that is a really important part of the RPGs that you can see that class divide. But for us, it was very personal to show how that would look in a context like straight out of a city from Colombia. So it's not actually just one city, but it's like several cities which we are basing like different places. It's like regions that we are basing those real places in Colombia. So we're trying to show a lot of those, and it's not all positive. Like, I mean, there are problems here as well, of course, as there are in everywhere in the world. But we really want to show unique things that people have never seen before, and to highlight the elements that seem more fantastical to us, that seem straight out of a Discovery Channel documentary. Like, I'm really old, that's why I use those analogies. So it's really important for us, like, people see this and this, oh my god, this is absolutely insane, this is absolutely surreal, and when they see it as part of a real city in Colombia, they would think that, oh my god, this is actually real. So yeah, we want to create that impact for people.